Hello and welcome back to the Hindustan Times podcast. I'm your host, Shashank Mattoo, reporting to you from Washington, D.C. Is Donald Trump now planning to make Pakistan one of America's top defense partners in the Middle East? That's all the buzz right now in Washington, D.C. Sitting here, there's a big conversation happening about the role that Pakistan seems to want to play in the Middle East. The country has signed a defense partnership with Saudi Arabia. It's planning to be part of the Gaza Stabilization Force, which Donald Trump has come up with. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has talked about a closer partnership with Pakistan that looks beyond things like counterterrorism in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. And that's contributed to this buzz that Pakistan wants to feature in Donald Trump's plans for a new Middle East. And that could be significantly worrying for India. So what exactly is going on? Joining us to discuss exactly this question is Kabir Taneja of the Observer Research Foundation. Kabir, could you start us off with just trying to help us make sense of what has been going on in the US-Pakistan relationship as it deals with the Middle East? Is America really interested in making Pakistan one of its key partners when it comes to defense in the Middle East?
Thanks, Shashank. Look, it's a recalibration for the Pakistanis, right? The Pakistanis have been sort of on the peripheral side of things when it comes to the Middle East, and that's not really anything to do with the Americans. They had a bit of a contested relationship with the Emiratis, for example, with the UAE, where the UAE, I remember a couple of years back, or maybe 2-3 years back, even stopped issuing visas to Pakistani workforce. On the Saudi side, which is much more sort of strategic in nature rather than with the Emiratis, in couple of years back, the Pakistanis were always known to sort of have this army for hire model for the Saudis, at least. And this goes back to the Mecca siege in 79 and so on and so forth. When the Saudis were beginning their Yemen campaign, and I think it was 2015-16 or somewhere on those lines, they, of course, reached out to the Pakistanis for support. I mean, support in the sense for bodies, for manpower. Right. And at that time, Pakistanis refused. And I think the Pakistanis were going through a lot between the Sharifs, and Imran Khan was having his moment under the sun. So they, I think, found out that domestic issues were way too complicated right now to have an army fighting outside where your soldiers may die. So I think that peeved off the Saudis a fair bit. So the relationship became very frosty over the past couple of years. And I think the Pakistanis have just stumbled into this American posture, which seems to be a bit more giving to the Pakistanis, in the sense that they caught the bull by the horn. They understood the bull first, which is Donald Trump, of course. But they caught the bull by the horn and basically realized that if you praise it enough, you nominate it for the Nobel Prize, you'll get a foot back in the door. And that's what's happening. It's not actually complicated beyond a point.
Right. So, but let's just talk about, what is being proposed. There's been a lot of analysis recently saying that actually the reset in the US-Pakistan relationship is not something that's purely tactical. It's that America is reassessing what it wants from Pakistan. It wants Pakistan to play a greater defense role in the Middle East. It wants Pakistan to send troops to Gaza. It wants Pakistan to help more in counterterrorism. It wants to help it take on this role because, of course, the entire security architecture since October 7th, the October 7th attacks on Israel have changed the Middle East entirely, and they want Pakistan to play that greater role. And again, like I said, Secretary of State Marco Rubio's comments that they want to rapidly expand the partnership with Pakistan. Could you explain why we're seeing all of this and what sort of role Pakistan would want to play? Does it want to play the role of a security guarantor in the Middle East, helping its Gulf countries, or what exactly is going on here?
So I think the Pakistanis would really want to get back into the good books of the Americans first, and of course their Arab partners, right? I think even the Arab countries had started to look at Pakistan from an economic point of view as sort of a bottomless pit. So you keep on giving money and you basically get no returns. So if you go back a couple of years, the sort of quote unquote loans that powers like Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis were offering Pakistan came with actually fairly high interest rates. And there was a huge push for the Pakistanis to pay back, which they were sort of defaulting over and over and over. So the Arab powers are not giving them easy leeway when it came to sort of their economic stability. And what is happening right now is because of October 7th, of how things have changed, but also majorly from a tactical point of view. Israel sort of asserting its domination from Lebanon till Iran, becoming this sort of uncontested military power in the air specifically, has sort of spooked the Arab powers. Now they are looking at what are the best solutions and solutions to go forward with. And they've also realized that the Americans are not coming. Most probably, if something happens, the Americans are not going to send their fighter planes, or if they might send fighter planes, but definitely no boots on the ground. So they are sort of preparing for that contingency, and that contingency includes Pakistan now, because the only sort of nuclear power in the Islamic world. Second, very well trained army. We keep on sort of forgetting that the Saudis, the Emiratis have armies, but they are not battle tested. So they could go into a battle tomorrow and actually face a very, very bad pushback from armies that are either better, or other armies or non-state actors. It could be either. That could be pushed back. So they need that kind of know-how back again into their kinetic thinking, because there is no security guarantor at that point of time. And finally, like we know that, for example, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is actually heading to the US for the first time since 2018, I think, in November. And all said and done, he's still seeking a defense deal with the Americans, right? So they are still gunning for that American security blanket over the Middle East, which is missing right now. But they're also preparing by utilizing or rekindling their relationship with countries like Pakistan, that if that doesn't come through, we will have to build certain alternatives where countries like Pakistan will actually provide a lot of know-how.
Right. So let's talk about, let's take the idea seriously and sort of treat it for what it is. What exactly could Pakistan do if it had to play this expanded security role? Is it intelligence support? Is it training? Is it actually putting boots on the ground to defend these countries physically from attacks from, say, Israel? What exactly would you say is on the cards?
I think it can do all of the above. Right. And if you go to I can't remember, I think it was Bob Woodward's book, War, which came out 2 years ago, maybe, that sort of has a quote by the Saudi Crown Prince saying that, if we need nukes, we just go to Pakistan and get them. Now, I don't remember what the attribution was. But there is that sort of thinking that that the Pakistani nuclear arsenal is sort of available if let's say the Saudis require, right? So that is one part. But the second part is, of course, if they are going to seriously think about, let's say, an international stabilization force in Gaza, you need bodies, you need soldiers to actually be deployed. And if you deploy Pakistani soldiers, let's say along with the Indonesians or maybe some other countries that can sort of pull in some number of people, some number of soldiers, the countries that are off the region, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's Jordan, sort of escape from that backlash that can come from their own populations if they do deploy in Gaza, and if they do end up fighting back against Hamas. So they don't want to get embroiled physically in a contestation that has really deep roots within their own societies. But if you get Pakistani soldiers, if you get Indonesian soldiers, or you get some other sort of countries to do that, you escape a regional trap as far as these countries are concerned. Because sort of just imagine sort of an Egyptian force trying to run Gaza. It doesn't make much sense. Same with the Jordanians. More than 50% of Jordan's population is Palestinian in descent. So they have those complications, while a country like Pakistan, who can provide this kind of know-how, doesn't have that kind of complication. And I don't think domestically anyone will chide Pakistan for deploying in Gaza, considering they have a very consistent stand against Israel during the entire past 2 years.
Right. And so what does Pakistan get in return for this? Does it get to project itself as a great defender of the Islamic world? Does it get billions of dollars in investments? What exactly are they looking for?
It does two things. I think it does get billions of dollars in investments, and it does get, I'm presuming it is going to get investments with very few strings attached. Right. So basically it will get capital for consumption instead of capital for consumption, and they're returning interest. And you and I know, and everyone knows, that the Pakistani economy is quite in the doldrums. So they need that kind of capital infusions to come in, and ideally without any strings attached. So that can be a barter system where they provide their military know-how. And again, going back to the point that it is a very battle-tested military. And in return, of course, the thing that most Arab monarchies have is money. It works out on actually both fronts. Both ultimately end up getting what they do seek out in the short to medium interim. I don't think this is a very long-term thinking involved going forward. I think a lot of countries, including those in the Middle East, in the Arab world specifically, do find Pakistan ideologically a little bit problematic now. If you
Right.
see the Saudis, they have spent 1 year trying to stamp out the Muslim Brotherhood, while the Pakistanis have not done that. Pakistani visas were stopped by the UAE, in part at least because of the number of cases that were coming of radicalization, for example. While if you see the UAE's template right now, it's about cohesion and pluralism, and that they have a synagogue and a temple, and of course. While still being an Islamic country. So a lot of these countries in the Middle East are moving away from what they were previously known for. So that project is very delicate, while Pakistan is not doing that. Right. So there is interim risk for them to overexpose themselves to the Pakistanis as well. So I think it is going to end up being balanced at some point between the both sides, and it's not going to hurdle in the way where I think a lot of public discourse thinks that it is suddenly going to become like this. The Saudis will be beholden to the Pakistanis. That is not going to happen, I think.
Right. This is interesting because I think that, sitting here in Washington, D.C., right, you speak to a lot of analysts of Pakistan. You speak to, you listen to some of the conversation that is happening, at least of what the Pakistani embassy here is saying. And a lot of them seem to believe that actually, no, this is a reset in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. We know that the Americans, after decades, are interested in having less of a presence in the Middle East. They're looking to hand off more of the security burden to countries for them to handle their own messes. Pakistan is in the right place at the right time. Pakistan will take on more of the security burden and will support Gulf countries. And therefore, their view is, if you look at what Marco Rubio has said recently about wanting to expand the US-Pakistan relationship, that actually, no, this is a new strategic alignment, and Pakistan is therefore much more valuable to America now. This is going to be a new dawn for the US-Pakistan relationship. That's the optimistic line from the Pakistanis. Talk to us about why that might not be the case. Why exactly is it that they may be wrong about the fact that this is a new reset, a new role for Pakistan in the Middle East?
Because, I mean, look, Shashank, we have heard about the new reset many times. I think the new reset right now is being seen through the lens of problems that are not Pakistan's problems at this point of time. Right, we are looking at Pakistan through the lens of Gaza, or what's happening in Gaza, or we are looking at from what the Americans want beyond a point, right? And from till now, the Pakistanis have said that the Americans, for example, have access to our oil reserves or critical minerals reserves, and so on and so forth, which is a very interesting play because first and foremost, Pakistan doesn't have that much oil. So I'm not particularly sure what's on offer. But they know that this kind of language goes well with President Trump, or with a person like President Trump, right? So if you see the whole critical mineral debate, they went to him with a box of critical minerals, and they showed it to him as if you're showing it to a toddler, like this is what you're going to get if we are in good books of each other.
Right.
So I think they've just understood President Trump well at this point of time. Right. But the second thing I think that is not discussed enough is that I think there, at some level in the Pakistani establishment, there is increasing wariness that they are overexposed to the Chinese.
Right.
And I think that hedge with the Americans is required to make sure that the Chinese do not start dictating terms in Islamabad. Right. So if you see the whole Gwadar issue or the Balochistan issue, there were, I think, over the past 2-3 years, there have been many attacks against Chinese workers, and couple dozen of Chinese workers have been killed. But if you see the language that the Chinese use, right, it is that, look, you get your house in order. Right, or you will not get this, or we will not do this, or we will not do that, despite the Pakistanis continuing saying that we are all weather brothers and so on and so forth. So I think they do realize that the Chinese have a significant upper hand, and yes, the Chinese are not going to tomorrow, abandon them in any shape or form. That relationship is going to be solid, but they are overexposed that part. And if they bring back the Americans to their fold, I think it works out for them in balancing that situation as well, in the long term, at least.
Right. No, and so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and the reason I called you up for this interview, was because of the reaction we've seen from India. Lots of people have been significantly worried about the fact that America could actually be looking to integrate Pakistan back into its Middle Eastern, let's say, security architecture, because they'll point out to the fact that in the 1950s, this was very much the pitch that the Pakistanis made. The US-Pakistan relationship in the 1950s, the beginnings of this alliance, shall we say, were on the basis of the fact that the Americans wanted Pakistan to fight the communism in the Middle East. And of course, Pakistan never really ended up showing up for that battle. Their whole goal was, we want to get investments, we want to get aid, we want to get military support so we can take on what is our real security threat, which is India. And there is a fear in India that the Americans are again going to make the same mistake. They're again going to say that, yes, okay, let us invest in Pakistan's critical mineral sector. Let's give them weapons, resources, etc., to take on a greater role in the Middle East. But in fact, the Pakistanis then turn around and use that against India. So there is some concern. Could you address that?
That concern is I mean, of course, it is a legitimate concern, but that concern is not new. I think it's a cyclical thing that happens with the Americans and the Pakistanis beyond a point. I can't remember maybe you can help me out, the foreign minister during Imran Khan's time. But I remember him saying in an interview to Western Channel, I think, and they asked him that, the Americans have left Afghanistan, of course, in 2021. Where does this leave? They're clearly not talking to the Pakistanis at that time, at least. This was under, I think, Biden or Obama, one of those two. So what happens now? Where's the situation? And he very prophetically said that, look at our positioning in the world, or geographic positioning in the world. They will come. They will come back. You can't escape Pakistan within your calculations. And they know how to also sort of take that opportunity and bring the Americans back. So it's not just about what the Americans want to do. It's also what the Pakistanis want to do, right? And we have to also remember that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is run by generals. It's not run by the State Department. It's not run by politicians. Definitely not run by senators. Right. So it's a very general to general relationship. During the recent Pakistan-Afghanistan talks in Turkey, there were some, for example, reports leaked that. By the Afghan side, and I think that was done deliberately, saying that, look, the US drones are already using Pakistani bases. So there is that kind of, I think, offerings that the Pakistanis can do, where especially with Trump's sort of this weird vision of Bagram being back into the American fold, right, and so on and so forth, or at least having some sort of purview over Afghanistan. And I think the Pakistan would step up and say, look, we are also in trouble with the Taliban in Afghanistan right now. This can blow up. Al Qaeda can come back. The Islamic State can come back in this part of the world, and the only thing stopping them right now is us. So you have to support us. There's no one else. You don't get along with the Iranians anyway. Central Asian states are too weak for this. It is us that you have to bank on us, and I think that's a very marketable position, right, for an administration like Trump. So it's just going back to the point that the Pakistanis have been doing this fairly well. They've honed their skills on how to recalibrate themselves in an American system after they have been sort of thrown out for some time. So we are just seeing that take place again.
So can I ask you, how does that impact the US relationship with India? We were just chatting before this interview that the relationship is not in a good place. Trust is nowhere to be found in the bilateral partnership. And the idea that the Pakistanis will make a pitch and Donald Trump, who has never won any prizes for great strategic thinking, will go after that pitch and says, yes, the Pakistanis will be useful partners and allies for us. Then a strengthened US partnership is created with Pakistan, is created as a result of that. And at the stage that US-India relations are at this point in time, that's going to hurt US-India relations even more at present. And that makes, the possibility of a reconciliation between the United States and India even harder. What do you think the impact of all of this is going to be on India? How should India be playing this?
I mean, look, ideally, I would say that India should work in a way where it's basically seeing the next 3 years through, right? In the long term, I think the Indians and the Americans are going to work very closely. That's not going to change fundamentally. So institutionally, I think it's fine. It's not a crisis mode yet. For the next 3 years, how do you manage someone like President Trump? And also, how do you manage just the fact that the Pakistanis have learned how to sort of deal with President Trump in their favor? So you need to come up with those solutions. You need to come up with those ideations. You need to take a little bit more risk. If you do meet President Trump in a multilateral setting or a bilateral setting, and he ends up saying one of those things that he says to n number of countries, you should be okay with it. I don't think that's a crisis point. Beyond a certain sort of leeway of it. So it is what it is. But you have to understand what's happening with India and the US. It's not only happening with India and the US. It's happened with Japan and US and Korea and US, and I mean Saudi and US has been happening since 2019 basically. So I think it's you have to come up with responses as per the situation and not shy away from giving a response. Right. And that if that means that you have to sort of swallow your pride a little bit, for a lack of better term, and do set up a meeting on Trump's term, as long as you're getting something in return. I don't think that's big of a crisis point. But institutionally, I don't think the India-US bilateral in the long term is going to suffer too much. I think it may change. It may change in the sense that the Indian calculations on how much you can trust the US is going to be shaky, and for good enough reasons right now. But India has very limited options. I mean, what are you going to do with Russia beyond the point? And China, of course, we know is a no-go area. So.
Yeah. No, but my question is then, let's say the India-US relationship does improve. What does India do to ensure that this sort of security alignment that the Americans may be thinking about with Pakistan, and that Pakistan is definitely pitching to the Americans, what could we do to make sure that security alignment does not?
Look. First, we have to see what happens with the Pakistanis. It's all talk and bluster right now.
Wow.
Let me see. Look, beyond a point, I don't think Donald Trump is going to look at Pakistan as a place where he's going to spend money. I think if the Pakistanis, for example, want something, they'll have to pay for it. That's how Donald Trump works. He cuts deals in favor of the Americans, right? And the Pakistanis are not in a position to do big defense deals or so on and so forth. So in return, what did they say? They said, you can come here and take our natural resources, right? That's what basically that's what they've put on the table. But that comes under the purview of basically private companies in the US. They decide whether they want to go in or not. Whether there is, I still haven't seen any data, for example, of how much oil reserves do Pakistanis have. Beyond the point. So what have they offered other than sort of this something that was just to presage Trump at that point of time? Because nothing has moved in any of those directions as far as natural resources go. So I think the Pakistanis are selling because they're good at it, a very good story at this point of time to the White House. The White House has bought it initially because it sort of works in their favor. They nominated him for the Peace Prize. They say you're the greatest president since sliced bread, all those kind of things. But we haven't seen anything move beyond what the Pakistanis have been saying. The Americans have not actually said too much. So let's wait and see actually what kind of mobility happens in this bilateral.
Right. So waiting ends watching. That is what India has been doing for a while now. But of course, something that will have to continue as we see how the relationship plays out between the United States and Pakistan. But Kabir Taneja of the Observer Research Foundation, thank you so much for joining us here on the HT podcast.
Thank you.